Ben Shapiro, the man responsible for gems such as Facts Don't Care About Your Feelings and Liberals Getting Own compilations on YouTube. Now it's about time that Mr. Facts Don't Care About Your Feelings start looking at the fact that his company, the Daily Wire, and quite frankly his own show, the Ben Shapiro Show, isn't pulling the numbers they used to. So let's see what we all can learn from this decline and how to avoid it, if it's even something to try to avoid in the first place. Now this is the Daily Wire is done, and here's the full story by Realum down here. And let's see how the Daily Wire climbed to its peak and then fell to zero. Alright, so let's continue on.
It's 2016. Overwatch just came out. Trump or Hillary signs are littering people's yards in your neighborhood. iDubbbz is still funny, and millions of young men are tuning in every single day to watch their favorite culture warriors, the Daily Wire. It's a fond memory, but that was a decade ago. Since then, Trump has been president twice, the internet has exploded in global usage, Leafy gained a good 50 pounds, and the Daily Wire is slowly closing its doors. Just the other day, Ben Shapiro was forced to lay off nearly 85%.
No, he lost 85% of his viewers. The Daily Wire hasn't exactly laid off 85% of its staff. Now, I'm not sure if he misspoke or if he's trying to predict the future based on current trajectory, but for the record, he just lost 85% of his viewers. Alright? The Daily Wire hasn't laid off 85% of its staff yet.
Of his staff, leading people across the country to ask a question nearly unthinkable a decade ago. How does one of the largest conservative media outlets go from producing full-length feature films and holding sway over a generation of young men to complete cultural irrelevancy and having to fire most of its staff? Today, I want to take a moment to reflect, respect, and learn from the downfall of the Daily Wire. Folks, welcome back to The Narrative with me, your host, Will Sexton, the host with the most and the most liberal ownage. Folks, today is a day that the Groypers have dreamed of, that Tucker Carlson warned us of, and really Candace Owens is responsible for. Folks, I'm speaking, of course, about the slow burning downfall and death of the Daily Wire. Yes, just the other day, Ben Shapiro was forced to lay off nearly 85% of his staff at the Daily Wire. For those of you who don't know what the Daily Wire is, I don't know why you're here, but if you are here for some reason, the Daily Wire was, for a very long time, the largest conservative media outlet amongst anybody under the age of 50 for a very long time, and held a significant sway over the Gamergate era going into the first Trump administration. Co-owned by one Jeremy Boring, and of course, everyone's favorite, the Orthodox Jew with a tude, Ben Shapiro. Daily Wire, of course, being where Ben Shapiro hosted his show, The Ben Shapiro Show. Anytime I speak to conservative or right-wing young men, many of them cite the Daily Wire, and specifically Ben Shapiro, as their red pill point, as the place wherein they got into conservative politics for the very first time. Now, granted, many of them cringe when they think about that, mostly because their politics have radically departed from anything Ben Shapiro was selling, but a fondness still exists in a lot of young men when it comes to the Daily Wire. It's like a...
Yeah, the best I can compare it to, using a non-political example, would be someone like PewDiePie. Now, PewDiePie used to be someone who's the most subscribed YouTube channel on this YouTube. He used to do all these shenanigans that made people look at him like, oh, this guy is such a clown. Now that he's married and have a son, he kind of needs to grow up a little, and now is making family videos. Alright? Not saying that that's a bad thing, but let's pay attention to the views he's getting now. He's not exactly getting as many views as he used to because he has pivoted away from all the crazy shenanigans he used to do into making family videos. Now, just sort of to say, family videos are not as entertaining as the dumb shenanigans he used to do, hence the drop in monthly viewership, which is okay because not everything needs to be about views. Now, if my channel ever pivots and evolves into something else, I highly doubt that my channel views will be the same as before. Whether is it in a good way or a bad way, it's depends on what's the evolution to. Now, the Daily Wire have changed its position depending on what's going on in the world. Henceforth, the viewers may not want to stay after the transition. So yeah, the same thing happened with PewDiePie.
Like a good ex. You had some good times, you had some good laughs, but ultimately you grew apart. And yet the problem is, the Daily Wire never grew. It just stayed where it was. It's a perfect example of being static media that very quickly faded into irrelevancy due to certain positions that it refused to cede on. Having bad opinions doesn't stop you from making content. It doesn't stop you from making shows. And there's probably an audience out there. It's not a lot of people, but I mean, people still watch the John Doyle show, and it's just getting started. So clearly the media market is not shying away from bad content. Bad content is everywhere and really makes up the bulk majority of content out there. But if you're here watching Vrillium, that means you're not into bad content. And if this is your first time, be sure to like, subscribe, hit the bell to get notified anytime I make a new post, and subscribe to my second channel to keep enjoying good content. But enough about good content. We're talking about bad content today. How does one of the most influential conservative media outlets, if not the most conservative media outlet of the last decade, go from complete cultural dominance to ruin? Well, it largely has to do with relevancy, bad economic decisions, terrible optics, and really the general opinion of the platform, a trend that we're seeing across all legacy media outlets. But in order to understand this story, we have to go back to before the Daily Wire was a legacy media outlet and was considered a rambunctious, rebellious, and ultimately innovative experience, back to the wild and untamed times of 2012. Now, in order to understand the Daily Wire, we need to understand the main players, especially the one who is arguably the main player. And I think we all know where this is going. Benjamin Aaron Shapiro, born 1984 to a Los Angeles Jewish family, with both mom and dad having roots in Hollywood, which, I mean, I'm not. I'm just reading the facts here. Shapiro quickly showed himself to be a prodigy academically, having skipped several grades, going on to study political science at UCLA, and then graduating from Harvard Law. Very impressive feat. I mean, that's not easy to do. His first book, Brainwashed, was published when he was only 18 years old. I mean, this is a guy who's very clearly academically skilled and sort of textually skilled, and yet he had a love for media. Maybe that came from his parents, who, like I said, both worked in Hollywood. And so he went with all of these credentials, with a law degree from Harvard Law. He decided to best use that as a screenwriter. I don't know. I mean, listen, if I understood the mind of Ben Shapiro, this would be a radically different show. However, he failed as a screenwriter. Many of his contemporaries citing him as being very intelligent, but not very creative, something that kind of makes sense. I mean, I don't think.
Yeah, let's just say that it's a completely different skill set to make a movie and make a good argument. For example, I mean, just because I'm good at basketball doesn't mean that I'll be good at baseball or any other sport for that matter. Sure, there's some overlap, but it's called an overlap for a reason. It's not a subset, right? He's great with debates, doesn't mean that he's going to be good at making movies. So, yeah, we need to stop looking at, billionaires as this, superhumans. I mean, all they have done is they've figured out how to make as much money as they can, right? They haven't figured out things like, I don't know, relationships and many other things that are, arguably more important than money.
Creative people would do well at Harvard Law. And so this put him at a crossroads. How can he combine his textual analysis, his political skills, with his desire to write, his desire to create, and really his desire to report? Well, in 2012, he's brought on to Breitbart. For those who don't know, 2012 Breitbart, this is like, if there was ever a time to get into Breitbart, it's then. That's probably like, it's the best time to get in it. It's like buying Bitcoin at $1. This is because shortly after his entrance into Breitbart, the man, passes away, and he is famously replaced by one Steve Bannon. I've talked about Bannon before, and I've talked specifically about Bannon at Breitbart before. Bannon at Breitbart was fundamental to modern conservative politics. Like, I can't stress enough how important it was that he was there. He not only helped bring about the grander spread and mass mobilization of Gamergate, he is effectively responsible for Trump being elected utilizing the strategies from Gamergate. I have an entire video about it that you should absolutely check out, but to give you the short, he's like a propaganda master. I mean, we will probably study him later on in the future when we study the great propagandists of history. However, surprisingly enough, Ben Shapiro doesn't like Bannon. See, Bannon was very populist. This is the first time in which Trump is running, and he's running on a very clear anti-war, anti-Middle Eastern intervention, sort of populist platform. And Bannon is quickly showing himself to be the press outlet for the Donald Trump campaign. That's basically all he is. In 2016, Shapiro actually literally wrote that he will never vote for Trump, proudly proclaiming himself a supporter of Ted Cruz. In March of 2016, he had enough, and Ben Shapiro leaves Breitbart permanently. Around the same time,
Yeah, I hope everyone here is starting to see what a roller coaster running a YouTube channel can be. I almost forget that Ben Shapiro was once opposed to Donald Trump. I mean, that was like what, almost 10 years ago at this point? Oh my goodness, how things have changed. When there's a change, sometimes you have to wonder if it's genuine or is he trying to appeal to a brand new audience, alright? And let's just say that since then, he has become a huge supporter of Donald Trump. So yeah, things have changed. I don't know what changed exactly that made him change his mind. Let's continue on.
this is when we get introduced to another character, the co-owner and like, I don't even want to say second in command. I'm pretty sure it's like the state of Israel, Ben Shapiro, and then Jeremy Boring. This is when we're introduced to Mr. Boring himself. Now, Jeremy Boring also attempted to get into Hollywood. Boring having come from a Texas Jewish background, which, if you don't know anything about that cultural connection, it has a large connection to Hollywood. A lot of like post-production and media stuff historically has happened in Texas, so there's kind of this weird connection between Texas and California. Point being, he ends up in California, in Los Angeles, working in Hollywood. However, as he claims, he became disillusioned with the entertainment industry and the politics associated with it, which, if you know anything about the time, this is when woke is beginning to form as an ideological movement that's kind of writing the undercurrent of the Democrat Party. And of course, Hollywood is entirely on board. Boring and Shapiro eventually found each other, having shared similar condemnations of both mainstream media and mainstream Hollywood. This basically brought them together, and they decided to start their own mission, their own blog, their own outlet called The Daily Wire. Now, this is where The Daily Wire begins definitively. Now, Boring, while being a filmmaker, also had experience as an entrepreneur, and so part of what he brings to this dynamic duo is a business expertise. And listen, I have my opinions on Daily Wire, of course we all do, but it has to be noted, Jeremy Boring, did make a good business decision here. He was really good at PR and advertising. What I mean by that is that he basically invented the YouTube outlet model. You have to understand, at that time, YouTube is not a place for politics. It's also not a place for serious media and serious actors. Sure, the news would post news clips on their channels, but when people thought of YouTube back then, you thought of cat videos and people falling off of things.
Yeah, how I miss those days when people just do dumb shit and then post about it. And then the world just laugh about it for a few days. Yeah, it seems like nothing is free from politics nowadays. I mean, do you guys miss that era of the internet?
Most professional outlet.
I don't want peace. I want problems always.
On YouTube at that time was Smosh, okay? This, not a time in which people are taking YouTube seriously as a career and as a media outlet. But Boring had the foresight to see that YouTube was going to be a lot bigger than it was at the time. And this is where he gets his idea to basically create a media outlet a la Fox News, but on YouTube, entirely for free, driven by advertising, subscriptions, and eventually merchandising. And this is objectively a good business idea. I think we can all admit that. Definitely ahead of its time. And granted, other celebrities were getting involved in this. People like Jimmy Kimmel, Jimmy Fallon, Conan were beginning to put mainstream media stuff into YouTube and formatting things specifically for YouTube, but Daily Wire did it better than anybody else and did it specifically for YouTube. And Ben Shapiro, what he brought from his Breitbart days was his experience with Gamergate politics. I said in the Gamergate video that what Gamergate really brought us was the birth of orthodox politics in America. Now, what does that mean? You got to understand, during the Obama years, it was seen as like a good thing to be bipartisan. It was seen as a good thing to like reach across the aisle, to be respectable, and to debate with good intentions. The Gamergate era smashes that and flips it on its head and introduces the idea of the political influencer, somebody who's not a politician, in many cases has no formal experience in politics, and yet their entire platform is dedicated to a specific political ideology, and even more specifically, about going against another political ideology.
Yeah, no one seems to have pointed out that once you win, people will stop looking at your content for the simple fact that your opponent has already been defeated. The problem is solved, to put it another way. So either you find a new problem to try to solve, or you just go out of business and let the channel die. But sadly, with regards to the Daily Wire, they have to keep the lights on. So they tried to pivot into something else, and as it stands right now, they haven't found a new golden goose. Or at least, they haven't found a new golden goose that doesn't require them to throw everything out the window that they once stood for. Right? So yeah, as you can see, the outside world can change. So you have to remain adaptable, and let's just say YouTube peaks are really high and then YouTube drops are really, really low. Right? So yeah, YouTube is not exactly a very stable job, to put it mildly.
Never ceding the point, never treating them well, and treating anybody who represents that ideology as an adversary rather than their fellow countryman who possesses a disagreement. Shapiro arguably was the best at this. There's a reason why when I say the words liberal feminist gets owned, you think of his yarmulke. Daily Wire effectively combines the power of clickbait in the pre-algorithmic YouTube and just political orthodoxy, this desire to see the opposition destroyed, and creates what we know as the Daily Wire, at least the foundings of Ben Shapiro's show, where he would go and debate. He would go and own the liberal feminists. And his show, the Ben Shapiro Show, was a perfect blend for young people because while it reported on what was going on, it specifically reported from the Daily Wire's lens. It was not reports on what Hillary supporters were up to. It was reports on what these feminist, terrible, godless, cringy Hillary Clinton supporters were up to and how they were destroying America. This model was, of course, wildly successful, especially with young men who felt an increasing pressure on them from the wokeification of mainstream institutions, the job market, Hollywood, and media at large. And all of this coincides with Donald Trump's rise. However, like I said, Ben Shapiro, while initially skeptical of Donald Trump, eventually becomes a fan of Trump and his politics, coinciding with a lot of moves by the Trump administration, showing that maybe it wasn't all that the people were promised. That takes us into Trump's first administration and the Daily Wire's rise to their peak. From 2017 to 2019, the Daily Wire explodes in growth, due mostly to what I already described, the Ben Shapiro Show and its signature model, but they begin to expand into other influencers. Like I said, what the Daily Wire did was pioneer the concept of a YouTube network. Now, other people had attempted this before, but no one had done it politically, and no one had done it to such an effect. See, they started recruiting other influencers, most notably Matt Walsh, Michael Knowles, and most importantly, Candace Owens, a figure who will become very important later. Every single one of them running and maintaining their own YouTube channel that all fed back into the main Daily Wire YouTube channel, which brought in millions in advertising. This is arguably the golden age of the Daily Wire. This is where they go from being a new media startup to an official titan of industry. Shapiro and his likes are seen at the White House, dining with Donald Trump, and increasingly throughout the administration, Ben Shapiro begins to grow closer to one key figure in the White House, that being one Jared Kushner. Leading AI companies all swear they don't sell your data.
Oh, this is an ad plug. Give me a minute. Damn, that's one hell of a long ad plug. Alright, let's continue on.
Before, Ben Shapiro, obviously born an Orthodox Los Angeles Jew. I don't think I have to tell you about his stance on Israel. Ben Shapiro very much so likes Israel, something that people noted very early on, but would only continue to reveal itself over time. I mean, all the way back in his college years, he was writing op-eds about how the US isn't doing enough for Israel and how Israel should be the main focus of the US. He even went and married an Israeli woman.
Israel woman, I love you so much. I want to marry Israel woman in life.
To say that Ben Shapiro likes the state of Israel is a criminal fucking understatement. And of course, in that, he becomes friends with Jared Kushner, fellow Orthodox Jew who's more specifically part of Chabad and is obviously tied to the Trump White House both by his position in the White House and the fact that he is married to Trump's daughter. This is when the Daily Wire begins to shift itself from being kind of first anti-Trump to neutral to Trump to eventually full-on pro-Trump, which is kind of funny seeing as that's why he left Breitbart, was the fact that Steve Bannon was so pro-Trump. So I guess in the end it was really Trump who won that debate. As of late 2023, this is the peak of the Daily Wire, definitively. Ben Shapiro Show was one of the top downloaded podcasts in America. All of their influencers are doing incredibly well, landing themselves speaking tours, debate tours, product sponsorships. I mean, just the works. And I can only imagine how much they were bringing in AdSense. At one point, the company was privately valued at $1 billion. So this is a YouTube company that is now valued at $1 billion. I don't think I can stress how insane that is. And the Daily Wire begins to venture out in creating their own brands to sponsor their shows. Things like Jeremy's Razors, Mayflower Cigars with Michael Knowles. This is also when they bring on Brett Cooper, everyone's favorite Daily Wire e-girl. Basically, things are going good for the Daily Wire, but things would change that year after a very important event that I think will go down really as a great turning point in American history. No pun intended. Hold on, we'll get there. Speaking about a very, very sad day in October, all the way across the world in the state of Israel, the infamous October 7th, 2023. Obviously, the war that we see today has been going on since 2023. While Israel has changed which enemies they're fighting and which lands they're attempting to take, the general conflict in the Middle East started on October 7th, 2023. I think we all know that. This is a fundamental watershed moment in conservative politics and especially in conservative media. This is because, for the first time, people are being exposed to the atrocities committed by Israel against the Palestinian people. So much so that all these media figures come out condemning the actions of the Israeli government, something that Ben Shapiro is obviously not very happy about. And so in response...
Yeah, I'm pretty sure there's a huge difference between the Israel in the Torah and the Israel that's currently in that region, right? I'm sure I can list off some differences. Actually, I'll just ask Gemini to help put it in a table form, right? So yeah, the Israel of today and the Israel in the Torah or in the Bible has almost nothing in common at this point. So yeah, let's see what does Ben Shapiro have to say about Israel.
The Daily Wire basically becomes the Israeli Wire. Like the Daily Israeli. Like this is when they start pivoting all of their content towards defend Israel full support. This is causing contention at the company. You have to understand, Jeremy Boring, Andrew Klavan, and Ben Shapiro are Jewish and have like very clear Zionist aims, but Matt Walsh, Michael Knowles, and Candace Owens are all Catholic, and they don't really talk about Israel at this time. And as more and more people in the media are highlighting these atrocities, as more and more people are turning on Israel, this trend doesn't get away from the Daily Wire. Most notably, Candace Owens very publicly begins to condemn the state of Israel, something that we know is an absolute fucking no-go for Ben Shapiro and his team. All of this culminates in early 2024 when Candace Owens very famously leaves, or moreover is kind of fired from the Daily Wire. Now this is the beginning of the end. Because let me note, Candace Owens was like a top earner for the Daily Wire. People loved her. They still love her. She's arguably more popular now, but at the time she was still wildly popular and was arguably the Daily Wire's top show, next to Matt Walsh and the Ben Shapiro Show. And not only are they now down one of their top earners, they now have made an enemy out of her, specifically on one political position that isn't very near and dear to the average American. And now people are starting to note that the Daily Wire is sounding more and more overt as propaganda rather than news. I mean, it was always known that the Daily Wire was biased news. It was biased content. They never shied away from that, but it was biased American conservative news. Okay, so it worked for American conservatives. If you wanted that kind of content, they had it for you in a million different flavors for a million different prices. But America isn't Israel. And so when all of the content starts switching to defending Israel, well, now suddenly people have questions. People are wondering, why is this channel that I watch to see American liberal feminazis get dunked on, why are we talking about a country thousands of miles away that most people couldn't point out on a map? And why is Ben Shapiro's yarmulke growing in size alongside his eyebrows? Basically, people start to become skeptical of the Daily Wire. And this, of course, coincides with another very important move in media. Because around this time is sort of the warm-up to Nick Fuentes' generational run. Fuentes begins to gain popularity, first with young conservatives and then with just everybody. And if you know anything about the relationship between Ben Shapiro and Nick Fuentes, they're certainly not exchanging Hanukkah cards, to say the least. And it needs to be noted that, a big part of Nick Fuentes' politics is not only a disdain for the left, but a clear attacking of what people understand to be the right, what he historically called Con Inc., conservative Inc., the sort of bought out Israel supporting right, with people like Ben Shapiro or Charlie Kirk being the center of that criticism. Ben Shapiro very famously refusing to debate Nick Fuentes, and this kind of being a back and forth silent feud that everyone was aware of. Now, people are starting to listen to Fuentes, and they're starting to see that maybe his takes on the Daily Wire have been right all along, that maybe this isn't an American platform, this is a Zionist platform. This is an Israeli platform. And with Candace Owens, one of their favorites, leaving for the very same reason, well, now it's all but confirmed that Ben Shapiro cares more about Israel than he does maintaining his American conservative media platform or speaking to American politics. All of this is to say, this is when the youth basically pulls out entirely. It's no longer cool to like the Daily Wire. It's honestly seen as cringe, it's seen as being naive, and really, it's just kind of seen as old. It's still using memes from a decade ago, and now it's operating as a overt Israeli propaganda outlet. Young people just aren't into it anymore. But they still retained a lot of Gen X. This is not when they definitively fell apart, because they still had a lot of fans and older people who weren't as concerned with this type of stuff. And they still have Matt Walsh, who's kind of this Israel neutral, grumpy girl dad Gen X whisperer. And so they could afford to lose the young people. They could afford to lose that battle. That's all right. Because while, yes, they faded into irrelevancy with young people, really what needs to be noted is that the big downfall here actually happened mostly economically. And funny enough, it's not Shapiro that you should blame. It's not Candace that you should give credit to. It's really the bad decisions of one Jeremy Boring, someone who serves as living proof that sometimes our dreams deferred can be our downfall. The definitive Daily Wire killer was their movies. It's that simple. It's always been clear that Jeremy Boring never really got over his Hollywood days. What Boring wanted most out of life was to work in Hollywood, and he was rejected by his peers at the time for what he claims is political bias. Granted, I've never seen his work. It never got put out, so I can't confirm whether or not he was a good filmmaker, a good screenwriter, but if his Daily Wire movies are any indication of what his work would have been like, I don't think it was political bias that kicked him out of Hollywood.
Even if it is, maybe it's his political biases that made his movies bad. From my own observation, it's usually people who can't let go of narratives that can't write very good stories. Right? In order to write a good story, you kind of need to develop the characters, set the scene, and many other things so that the story can actually make sense. Now, if you have to sell a narrative, you have to sacrifice story, character development, and many other very important things that make a good story. And let's just say that if you're too overt about it and you try to scream it in people's face, people will not connect with the characters in a way. So yeah.
I'm just saying. Like I said before, Daily Wire launched its premium subscription service, and part of that was the release of Daily Wire movies with classics such as Lady Ballers, a movie about a team of men who claim to be transgender and then play women's basketball. And that's other films like their version of Snow White with Brett Cooper. And then moreover, movies that like aren't political. See, that's the thing, is that the Daily Wire movie outlet wasn't very political. Like, sure, they had Lady Ballers, and it was the studio that hosted What is a Woman, Am I Racist, which are arguably like actually fairly good. I can't even hate. But we can imagine that like the money on that was probably split 50-50 with Matt Walsh, so it's not like they were earning a big profit on that. But really, they focused a lot of energy into like non-political movies. It was very clear that Boring just wanted to be a filmmaker and just like wanted to make movies. And sure, they chalk the argument up to, oh, well, the cast isn't wokeified and the script isn't wokeified, but it's not like overtly political in the way of What is a Woman or Lady Ballers. It's not explicitly political writing that is meant to give a political message. They're just like movies. Movies that, might I add, aren't very good. Like, I don't think anyone really liked them. They weren't that good. You can actually watch them for free on YouTube right now. Basically, all but openly said that these films bankrupted the Daily Wire. Because I don't know if you know this, making a movie's not cheap to do. It takes a lot of money. We don't actually know what the budget was for most of these films, but for Terror on the Prairie, their attempt at a Western film, it only grossed $13,000. I don't know, like you can't hire Hollywood catering for $13,000, okay? Like you can't rent a trailer for $13,000, okay? To say that like a movie's takes a lot more than that, okay? That means that they are in the red to the tune of like millions of dollars, okay? I don't think I can stress that enough as someone who worked in production. And this happened with basically every movie. And also, it's kind of hard to monetize a movie on YouTube. Like, sure, there's AdSense, but AdSense can make a good living for like one person or a family or even a company if there's enough going on. But to fund a movie like to the tune of millions of dollars, that's not happening. And so all these films, coupled with their growing irrelevancy, they very quickly fall into bankruptcy and aren't making any money. And while all this is going on, it all culminates with Trump's second term. And moreover, the public's disapproval of Trump in his second term. Because like I said, not only are they hemorrhaging money via these movies, people are now leaving and going with Tucker Carlson. They're leaving and going with Candace Owens. And those are two platforms that very clearly have an anti-Israel stint. And
Yeah, those two are not exactly anti-Israel in the traditional sense. They're more like anti-Israeli action in Gaza after October 7th, right? I'm just gonna be honest here, right? The campaign in Gaza has been nothing short of reckless, right? And that's if you don't want to use the word genocide. Now, the least you have to acknowledge is that randomly blowing up every building you see is not exactly what we would call targeted operations, right? There's so many Palestinians dead, and I don't know how much how much time are they spending to actually vet the targets before they go in there and just blow stuff up. So yeah, that level of casualty is not exactly what I would say acceptable for a modern targeted operation, right? That seems a little too high to.
the two platforms that very actively criticize the Daily Wire and other political actors who are seemingly working on behalf of Israel. And it's from here that the Daily Wire effectively loses all of its viewership. I mean, seriously, they lost Brett Cooper. You know how hard like, come on. But now the woman market is completely boxed out and largely going to Candace Owens. And during this, all of their viewership is beginning to dwindle. And this leads us to today. Ben Shapiro has basically no audience. His most viewed content is when people are ripping on him. I alone performed better than his last 2 months on 2 Instagram clips that I made shitting on him. Like that's how popular it is right now to just shit on Ben Shapiro. Like Ben Shapiro is not in the good graces of the American people in any capacity. And all they've
Yeah, he built his platform slam dunking on liberals. So it seems like the fruits of the tree he planted, i.e. the facts don't care about your feelings crowd, is coming back to remind him of his own saying. People are dunking on him because nowadays his unwavering support for Israel seems to come from an emotional place, right? I mean, he married an Israeli woman. Nothing wrong with that, but that's okay. Just that when you build a platform saying facts don't care about your feelings and you fail to separate your feelings for Israel because your wife is from there, people are gonna pillory you for it, right? So yeah, you kind of need to stand on principle, especially one as publicly as yours.
Done is continue to double down on their pro-Israel standpoints. And this is why the Daily Wire is where it is. But all of this leads us to a very, very simple conclusion and a very simple messaging that we all need to understand. I think we can all, for a moment here, pay our respects to the Daily Wire. Now, I was never a fan. It's very famous that I grew up in a very liberal household, and I was very liberal at the time of 2016 and all that, but I assume many of you were probably conservative all the way through and probably have deep, very fond experiences in your past with the Daily Wire. Many people cite Ben Shapiro as, ironically enough, who red-pilled them in the first place. And it's undeniable that their model, changed the way in which politics is consumed by young people forever, if not all of America. But the car is always going to replace the horse, the streetlight, the lamplighter. And if you can't adapt, you end up dying off. It's, ironically enough, the main tenet of capitalism, the same system that they themselves promoted so fiercely in the face of woke communism, as they would say. Right now, their only performers are Matt Walsh and Michael Knowles, who both are clearly starting to move away from Daily Wire. It's really any day now that Matt Walsh goes out on his own. Same with Michael Knowles. I mean, really, Matt Walsh, more than anybody, if he pulled a Candace and just went on his own and then just very publicly said, I don't like Israel, not a full condemnation, doesn't gotta buy the USS Liberty hat, doesn't have to do any of that, doesn't have to interview Nick Fuentes. He literally could just go, make his own channel and say, I don't like Israel, and he would gain a 90% approval rating with young Gen Z men overnight. Suddenly we all would stop feeling bad about enjoying What Is a Woman and Am I Racist? We would immediately become his biggest fans. I actually literally made a clip back in the day joking about that if he did that, all of us would switch over, and literally everyone agreed that we would love to see him switch over, and he would make so much more money, especially in today's AdSense climate. I can't even express how much money he'd be making. Tucker Carlson is making a fucking killing, and Matt Walsh would only do better. I can only imagine how much Candace Owens is making. It's probably absurd. But hey, maybe he's just a loyal guy. I don't know. Or maybe they have blackmail on him. Who knows? Jeremy Boring could be sitting on an extended cut of What Is a Woman, where he goes to Epstein Island and tries to find out. I don't know. For some reason, they're still there, but it's becoming very clear that either they're going to leave or they're going to be forced to go because there'll be no more Daily Wire left. With all this being said, it's become very clear that Daily Wire, from the beginning, was predicated on a lie. It was predicated on shifting political narratives, all of them being in the pursuit of Israeli interest, all of them being in pursuit of Israeli propaganda. And this is the problem. This is the turning point, that the young people don't like that. Young people don't like propaganda, which is kind of funny because young people consume a lot of propaganda, but we don't like knowing that we're consuming propaganda. Think Russian style, not Israeli style, if that makes sense. And so, to conclude, we can all mourn the death of this giant, recognize its achievements, recognize its innovations, but ultimately, I think we're better off without the Daily Wire, and I think we're better off without Ben Shapiro, his takes, and just the amount of Israeli propaganda in the general media market. And so, despite a decade of owning the liberal feminists, in the end, it was Ben Shapiro who got owned. Folks, that is going to do it for us today on this episode of The Narrative. I hope you enjoyed. Man, what a time. Let me know down below, are you happy that the Daily Wire is in decline? Are you...
Alright, so that's the end of the video. Let's hope that this channel doesn't devolve into the same nonsense as the Daily Wire has devolved into. People are gravitating towards a more solo creator type of media consumption, as evidenced by the popularity of talents such as Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson. After they left their respective parent companies, now they are less tethered to their parent companies. It seems like they have more freedom to cover topics they were previously off limits to. However, that doesn't mean that it's all sunshine and rainbows, alright? They now have a different set of problems, and I hope they don't devolve into a screaming match like so many other podcasts have become. And let's just say on that note, I hope you guys have enjoyed this video, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye bye.